When Star Trek Enterprise premiered in 2001, originally just called Enterprise, it arrived carrying a strange burden. It was a prequel to a franchise that spent its entire existence moving forward. It followed immediately after the polished The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager shows that depicted a confident, fully formed United Federation of Planets with incredible technology and well-worn traditions. Enterprise asked viewers to step backward to a time before the Prime Directive, before Starfleet really knew what it was doing, before humans had earned their place on the galactic stage. At the time, the idea was controversial. Looking back, I think it was inspired. One of the most impressive things about Enterprise is what it accomplished visually. The show somehow managed to look futuristic to a 2000s audience, while simultaneously looking less advanced than a show on a low budget from the 1960s. That was not an easy needle to thread, yet the production design nailed it. Far better than Strange New Worlds, which is supposedly pre-Kirk, but somehow looks more advanced than The Next Generation. The NX-01 Enterprise feels like a stepping stone between NASA and Starfleet. The ships look functional, yet cramped, slightly uncomfortable. This is not a luxury liner gliding through space, this is a prototype. The technology reflects this perfectly. Instead of photon torpedoes that were just glowing balls of light, this ship fired what looked like regular missiles. View screens are smaller and clunkier, and yes, some of the TV screens hanging on the wall look a little dated now. There were real physical buttons everywhere, real tactile controls that looked like they could break if you hit them too hard. Instead of tractor beams, we had grappling hooks. This is not the refined future of Picard and Janeway. This is trial and error, sometimes bordering on reckless optimism. The grounded approach extends to the characters themselves. The crew of the Enterprise act far more like people from our own time than the elevated, quasi-formal humans of later Star Trek. They talk about movies, they use familiar language. They say flashlight instead of the ridiculous term palm beacon that they used in Star Trek Voyager. These might sound like trivial details, but they matter. They make the show feel immediate and relatable. Archer and his crew don't feel like distant future icons, they feel more relatable to us in the 21st century. Captain Jonathan Archer in particular sets the tone. He is confident, but not smug. He believes deeply in humanity's potential, even when that belief gets him into trouble. Archer doesn't have the moral certainty of Picard, or the seasoned diplomacy of Sisko. He's figuring things out as he goes and doing the best he can, and Scott Bakula plays him with a mix of idealism and stubbornness that feels earned. Archer wants to do the right thing, even if he doesn't quite know what the right thing is yet. That uncertainty gives the character texture. The rest of the cast largely rises to the same level. Malcolm Reed is a weapons enthusiast who is deeply uncomfortable in social situations. His rigid sense of duty is core to his character, and he has to figure out how to fit his military idealism into Starfleet. Hoshi Sato is one of Enterprise's quiet triumphs. She's a brilliant, likable, and essential character. Her linguistic skills feel genuinely impressive and plausible. She's also scared sometimes, overwhelmed by deep space, and honest about it. That vulnerability makes her feel real. One of my favorite moments is when she asks to have her quarters changed because the stars are going the wrong way out the window. It's a good character moment. It shows that people on this ship are regular humans. T'Pol is one of the more interesting characters on the show. Initially, she comes across as cold, emotionless in all the wrong ways, and occasionally is unlikable. At the time, this drew a lot of criticism. In hindsight, it was actually right. Vulcans, as Enterprise presents them, are not yet the serene philosophers we associate with Spock or Tuvok. They are rigid, militaristic, and deeply uncomfortable with humanity's rapid progress. T'Pol's emotional struggles in later seasons aren't a betrayal of Vulcan logic, they're the consequence of it. Over time, she becomes more nuanced, more compassionate, and more recognizably Vulcan in the way she understands humans. Her arc is subtle and rewarding. Phlox, meanwhile, is one of the best original aliens the franchise has ever created. He functions as comic relief without being a joke, and delivers genuinely powerful dramatic moments when the story demands it. As a Denobulan, he serves as an astute observer of humanity, often holding up a mirror to our contradictions. He's curious, he's ethical, in his own way, and refreshingly alien without being inaccessible. Travis Mayweather is often criticized for being underdeveloped, and that criticism isn't entirely unfair. Early on, he's a bit too boyish and simple, but over time the show does add layers to him, Particularly through his background as a space boomer, through him we see a society adjusting to higher warp speeds in a galaxy that suddenly feels far more crowded than it used to. These touches of world building give Enterprise a lived-in quality that rewards upon repeat viewing. Then there's Shran. Although not a regular cast member, Jeffrey Combs' Andorian character steals every episode that he's in. Shran is proud, aggressive, honorable, and endlessly entertaining. More importantly, he represents one of Enterprise's greatest contributions to Star Trek lore, the Andorians. Enterprise gave us more of the Andorians than any other version of Star Trek. The Vulcan-Andorian conflict is one of the show's smartest long-term story strategies. It reframes Vulcan in a way that initially shocked viewers, including myself, but ultimately deepened the mythology. Vulcans are antagonistic towards humans not because they're evil, but because they're afraid of humanity. Humans' rapid progress threatens their carefully controlled worldview. Making mind melds taboo and depicting Vulcans as more militaristic was ridiculed at the time, but it was brilliant. It gave Vulcans somewhere to grow, somewhere to move forward to. Through the conflict with Vulcans and Andorians, humans earned their place on the galactic stage. Humans helped bring the Vulcans and Andorians together, which was quite the accomplishment. Not through superior technology or force, but diplomacy and moral presence. Archer and his crew helped bring Vulcans and Andorians together, laying the groundwork for what will eventually become the Federation. Watching that process unfold is one of the most rewarding things about the show Enterprise. Enterprise's seasons 1 and 2 embody this sense of wonder perfectly. Everything is new. Every first contact feels dangerous and exhilarating. There is a palpable excitement to exploration that later Trek, for all of its polish, sometimes lacks. Standout episodes like the Andorian Incident, Breaking the Ice, Dead Stop, and First Flight capture this tone beautifully. Broken Bow, the series premiere, is a fantastic opener that establishes the stakes, the characters, and the ethos of the show with confidence. Visually and aesthetically, Enterprise also deserves praise. The uniforms look like natural extensions of NASA flight suits, complete with mission patches. Admirals wearing neckties feel exactly right for a Starfleet that is closer to our time than Picard's. Not everything worked. The opening credits music for one was, well, to be quite frank, complete garbage. I know it has its defenders, but I'm not one of them. It's hard to defend Faith of the Heart, no matter how nostalgic some fans have become about it. It simply doesn't match the tone or legacy of the franchise. More seriously, the show stumbled badly in Season 3. The Xindi arc, while ambitious, ultimately derailed the series. In theory, a season-long story about a looming existential threat could have been compelling. In practice, it was bloated, uneven, and filled with too much filler. What might have worked beautifully as a multi-episode arc became a slog. Worse, it dragged the already shaky temporal Cold War storyline into a direction that felt unearned. The sphere builders were never fully realized, and the mythology surrounding them remained frustratingly vague, even at the end of the season. The temporal Cold War itself never received a satisfying conclusion, instead being awkwardly wrapped up in the Season 4 premiere, which had an out-of-left-field story about space Nazis. After the grim endurance test of Season 3, that resolution felt almost insulting. To this day, it's a shame we never learned who Future Guy really was. That dangling thread represents one of Enterprise's biggest missed opportunities, and yet Season 4 is where the show really redeemed itself, and then some. This is when Enterprise goes from good to great. Under new creative direction, the series refocuses itself on tightly constructed story arcs that deepen the Star Trek lore rather than distort it. Storylines explore Vulcan reform, the augments, Andorian politics, and the early steps towards Federation unity. It is, without exaggeration, one of the best seasons of Star Trek in any era. By the time the show reaches its penultimate two-parter, it feels like Enterprise has finally become what it always meant to be. Unfortunately, what follows, These Are the Voyages, a next-generation holodeck episode masquerading as an Enterprise finale, is widely, and rightly, regarded as a big disappointment. Ending the show by reframing it as someone else's nostalgia trip was a bit of an insult to Enterprise. Despite its flaws, however, Star Trek Enterprise has aged remarkably well over the last quarter century. In some ways, it feels more relevant now than it did when it aired. Its emphasis on uncertainty, first steps, and moral growing pains resonates in a world that no longer feels confident about the future as it once did. I love rewatching this series. I wish it had lasted more than 4 seasons. It deserved better. Better ratings, better marketing, and a proper conclusion. And yet, in this era of inconsistent, modern, Kurtzman-era Star Trek, Enterprise feels like the last, truly great Star Trek series. It wasn't perfect, but it was earnest, thoughtful, and deeply rooted in the spirit of exploration that defines the franchise. And it was an excellent capstone to the Berman era of Star Trek. Enterprise didn't just look backward, it showed us where the future began. My name is Eric Wilford Watson. Thank you for watching this channel. If you want to support this channel, the best way you can do that is to buy my books on Amazon.com. You can read a free sample at ericwilfordwatson.com and find me on social media. Links in the description below. Eric Wilford Watson signing out.